All right, coaches. I'm on today with Coach Jaime of Tahoma High School, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to develop a program in your first year. Coach Jaime was at Kent Lake for a long time and is stepping into a new role at Tahoma. And so we're going to focus a little bit on his plans to develop his program early on. And so I'll let him introduce himself a little bit, and then we'll get started. Hey, Coach, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Yep, like Coach Kevin said, my name is Jaime, and I've coached since 2006, and those years have been summer ball, high school ball, all the way from little dudes. Right now, I'm coaching my kids who are 8 and 9 years old, so little guys, all the way up to 18U. And then I was at Kent Lake. I was at Rogers for 2 years, and then Kent Lake for the last 8 years. And then I came over to Tahoma this year, and fortunate enough to be able to coach Tahoma for this upcoming season. So stepping into a good situation though here at Tahoma. Left a great school at Kent Lake, and then blessed to be at a great school here with Tahoma. Tahoma, Kevin, you're probably familiar with Coach Russ Hayden though.
Yep.
So he was here for, I think, head coaching for 29 years, and him and I have been good buddies over the years.
Good afternoon, Spartan.
All right.
Yeah, so I've been blessed to be able to step into the coaching role that was occupied by Coach Russ Hayden, who's in the Washington State Baseball Hall of Fame. And our relationship's grown over the years. We've become good buddies. And he had a health situation that arose. So I was able to try and help out him in the school and do some coaching this year. So excited for that opportunity. And fortunately, Coach Hayden's doing well, and he'll be able to help out as well. So that's a blessing to have a Hall of Famer alongside you helping too. So excited for this upcoming season though.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, congratulations on the new job. Yeah. Coach Hayden is a legend.
Yep.
He came up, I spoke at a clinic a few years back, and he came up and said some nice things that made my day. So wish him all the best with his health, and glad to hear he's going to stick around and help you out this year. That's great. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So my first question for you today is what's kind of the first concept or expectation, skill, core covenant, whatever you want to call it, but sort of the first thing you plan to teach your kids when you get out there this spring?
Yeah, that was a tough one because you've got, you mentioned concepts, expectations, skills, core covenants. So I think I'm going to kind of save the covenants and some of the cultural components for a little bit later. But I think that, having said that, I think it's really important as you're starting off the year. In Washington, we only get 2 weeks before we have to be game ready. So that makes it really tough. And you feel kind of like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to address everything. Yeah. But I think that for me, the big thing is we got to hit those skills to be able to play in a game. We got to go over the basics of first and thirds and bunt Ds and relays and all those different things, sign systems and all that stuff. So you got to hit those things. But I think it's important at the same time, we're also trying to develop our culture, especially like stepping into a new program like myself this year. I'm fortunate that this isn't a program that needs really to be rebuilt or anything. They're a great program, and Coach Russ has done an awesome job. So it's just trying to continue to develop what's already been in place, and make that my own. You can't try and be another coach. Coach Russ is the best version of himself, and you can't try and do that. So you got to have your own fingerprint on the program as well. But I think getting back to addressing the question specifically, for me, it's trying to install skills that are also going to relate to a cultural component. So that means that, we'll teach our infield outfield routine pretty early, but everything in that infield outfield routine correlates to what we're trying to do from a cultural component as well. For instance, we want a really aggressive, fast-paced, high energy infield outfield routine. Well, that's also the message that we're trying to send our players culturally as well, that we want them to play the game for fun, not with stress. We want them to be playing with a lot of freedom. And that's what we're trying to install through something like an infield outfield routine. Or if we're going through, trying to install our sign system, it's got to have a cultural component that, hey, you're responsible to your teammates. to be a strong servant leader out there. And that means knowing what you're doing, owning those roles. And I'll talk a little bit more about roles coming up. But yeah, I think just looking for skills that are going to transfer to cultural components, huge. Getting a little bit more specific to like different parts of the game. I'd say defensively, we're going to start with like, after we get through tryouts and stuff and the team's been formed, we'll start with sprinting on and off the field, making sure that we do that the right way. It's kind of thing that you hope you only need to practice for 5 or 10 minutes, but that's the first block. You got to get on and off the right way, and everybody's got to understand why we're doing that. We'll talk about prep steps, and we'll try and get everybody synced up with the same type of prep step and landing at the same time. Again, that's a big cultural thing that every move matters. That's a big saying for me. So when we're going through like infield, outfield, every move matters. That means that when we throw the ball backdoor to the third baseman and the third baseman's, lobbing the ball into the dude that's shagging for us next to the coach, that we snap the ball in. Like we want a quick tag with the third baseman. He's got switch his feet really quick, make a hard throw to the guy who's catching off to the side of the fungoer. And every move's got to matter. Just like if, the Yankees were there watching you, try and get ready for the game and stuff. So yeah, sprinting on and off, prep steps. We'll talk about playing catch. I don't know where you're at with this one, Kevin, but the new buzzword is like catch play. And I don't know, like I haven't been able to get on that bandwagon yet. I still call it playing catch.
I don't call it catch play. No.
Okay.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I tell them we run stretch throw, and I get why it's being called that. And I know where you're headed here with the importance of playing good catch and taking care of the baseball. And I'm in total agreement with that, but yeah, I don't say catch play.
Yep. Yeah. And I think again, it's a cultural component that the way that we're playing catch says a lot about us as people, teammates. Also learning how to take care of your arm. We'll talk about arm care a lot. And then get the kids to be aggressive. So defensively, those are the big things that we'll start with, the real bare bones basics, making sure that we have those things nailed down. Offensively, we'll talk a lot about hitting roles. I'm big into each athlete knowing what their role is going to be and kind of bucketing those guys. That's another buzzword, bucketing people. We used to say grouping, but now it's buckets. So we'll put those guys into their different roles. Are you familiar with Matt Deggs at all?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So have you like read his materials that he has or anything?
Yeah, the what's it, the Wolf Pack?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that stuff really had a big impact on me when I read those materials a couple of years ago, and especially talking about guys having a role and stuff. I'm a big supporter of that. So his stuff's awesome. And what I really respect about what he does is he finds a way to constantly infuse culture into everything that they're doing.
Hold on just a sec, Coach. Sorry.
So even like how he names his drills and things like that, he always finds a way to relate that back to his cultural system. But yeah, offensively, we'll talk about hitting roles right away. And then we'll get into the bases and being really aggressive, setting the tone there as well. So the first thing that we'll do base running is work on our rounds. I know most people work on just like, your hard 90 through the bag, but we'll work on our rounds first and really trying to put pressure on the defense and the expectation that we're always looking to the next bag until they make the play that stops us. So I think those are the first skills that we're going to focus on, and then try and couple those with what we're going to be trying to do on the cultural side as well.
Awesome. I love it. A good friend of mine, Tony Wolden up at Mount Vernon, I talked to him a few years ago about how to develop same kind of ideas. And he said, you develop that stuff every single day in your championship habits. And that's always stuck with me. And that's, I think, exactly what you're saying is you're going to create skills. You're going to establish, the routines and how you play catch and how you defend and that kind of stuff. And you're going to do it in a way where your culture is being developed as a part of that. And the expectation is being developed. I think that's awesome. So really, really good stuff. Okay, kind of moving into number 2 here. How do you plan to develop your culture in year 1? You kind of hit on that a little bit. So go ahead and go into some of the stuff you want to talk about with this one.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when it comes to culture is that you gotta have a system, and that system needs to be written down somewhere. You need to develop that. So the best thing for me was I'm a huge like Jocko Willink fan as well. So his whole like good video, we'll show that the first one of the first team meetings once all the teams are established. But you know, like just looking at a situation that could be kind of a bummer, and looking at like, you know, good, like how can we get better from that. So anyways, my good story was that I had jury duty probably, well, I think it was 11 years ago. And I was like, you know, in the room, and I thought, okay, I'm going to take like all my coaching stuff and baseball stuff and just iron out my coaching philosophy. And I was a huge Pete Carroll fan at the time, still am, but I was going through his book and think about philosophy stuff and everything. So for, I don't know, it was like 12 hours for 2 days, just was able to iron that out, put it on paper, and then ever since just continuing to kind of refine that. But yeah, you gotta have a system, write it down. And then for us here at Kent Lake, we called it Falcon Nation. Here, it's Bear Nation with the Tahoma Bears. And Bear Nation is really, I'm a social studies teacher. And I didn't ask you what you taught. What do you teach though, Kevin?
I teach 8th grade social studies and leadership.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're right there.
Yeah, that's perfect. So as a social studies person, you know, I tend to think of like kind of building a society or a nation, civilization, stuff like that. I was a Sim City nerd back in the 90s, and like playing like those empire building games and stuff. So it's kind of, you know, it's fun as a coach to kind of think of it the same way, like you're trying to build something here. So anyways, that's kind of how my mind worked in trying to come up with a system. But we'll start developing that culture from, you know, day one. And Bear Nation has different parts though to it. So it starts off with like a constitution. You gotta have like your mission statement, your core values, what do you stand for? And moving on from there, we have an identity. Every nation has its own identity. You know, what's our team identity going to be? The players, young people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And we'll talk to them about the identity of our program and what that looks like. Then we'll get into shared values. Everybody wants to know, you know, what's our why? That's another kind of buzzword these days, but why are we doing this? And what's our why as a team, as individuals? And we'll talk about, you know, the team identity. And then there's some kind of third layers. Got the constitution at the top, identity, shared values. And then moving on from that, the environment, what's it going to feel like? So every nation has its own environment and climate, things like that. So what's our environment? What does it feel like to be part of the program around here? What does it feel like to be in the dugout, to be in the weight room, to be at practices, games? We'll get into language. Every nation has a language that they share. So what does it sound like to be on the field with our team? For coaches, what's our shared language? We want to make sure that we're on the same page with our verbiage so the players aren't confused. A big thing that I've added in the last couple of years is actual definitions for the terms that we're using, making sure that we'll be on the same page as coaches with those terms, so that when we're communicating, it's really crystal clear what we're talking about. And roles, jobs, again, getting into offensive roles and the whole Matt Deggs Wolfpack thing. He talks about like bombers, ball players. You know, for us, we have beefers. Those are like the big guys that drive the ball. We call them the beefers because they're getting their ribbies out there. They're having their steaks. We talk about speed raiders, and we have hybrids, guys that can do both. And then we have winners, the guys that maybe don't fall into a category being, you know, for us, a speed raider is somebody that's going to be running, you know, right around like a sub 760. Beefer is somebody that's going to be driving the ball. We use Rapsodo a lot to monitor their hitting and to help group them so that we know what they're capable of. Gives them something objective too to work towards. So like a beefer for us is somebody that the top 10% of their hits on Rapsodo is over 350. Exit velos for the top 10% are right around 90. And then hybrids are guys that can do both. They can run, you know, sub 7-160. They can drive balls consistently over 350, hitting the ball over 90 consistently. And then the winners are guys that can't do either one, but we expect them to be winners, have that winner attitude, do whatever is needed, be great with like sack bunting, be great with slashing, be great with base running, getting jumps off of guys, delayed steals, stealing thirds, stuff like that you can do even without great speed. So a lot of different roles there, but I got lost a little bit in those. But moving on to like some of the other parts of like what Bear Nation is for us: rules, standards. Every nation has its own rules and laws. And then the last one is land and territory. Every nation has its land. So for us, that means the dugout is our land, practice field's our land. How do we treat those things? How do we take care of them? How do we respect those areas? Getting into like servant leadership. Legacy is a popular book and a really good one. And talking about the idea of sweeping the sheds, we buy into that wholeheartedly. So like our leaders will be responsible for literally brooming out the dugouts, home and away games, and trying to help the guys learn what it's like to be a servant leader. So those are the different aspects of like, Bear Nation for us and trying to build out. So we'll start that, right away, day one of tryouts. But then once we get the team set, that's when the first few weeks, I have different PowerPoints that we'll show the players during classroom time, like before practice starts. So we usually spend like 20 to 30 minutes, either like at Kent Lake, we would spend 20 or 30 minutes in my classroom, or like in the PAC area, we have like a little pavilion or auditorium. So we meet there. I put together these PowerPoints, and we'll have PowerPoints that are like on skills, like a relay system, or we'll have a PowerPoint on like Bear Nation, which is talking about, hey, these are like the roles, and this is how we see you guys fitting into your role, and how we want you guys to own it, practice it, embrace it, and then dominate those different roles. So that'll be big the first few weeks. And then just, like Matt Degg says, culture is something that you gotta just invest in every single day, and you gotta police it really closely. You gotta monitor it. You gotta nurture it. So it's just being really attentive, being creative when you make your practice plans. I've got like a little reminder list of things to keep in mind when I'm creating a practice plan. One of them is like, how are we going to infuse our culture into the practice plan? And that's hard, because it's easier to just come up with your practice plan. Like, we're doing warm up, stretch, throw. We're going to do individual defense, hitting, team defense, whatever. That's easy. If you're trying to think of like, how can we infuse our culture into team defense, that's a little bit trickier. And that's one thing that like Dex is awesome at. Like, he'll name the drill, attitude and intensity or whatever, and he'll come up with some way to tie that in. So it means being creative and usually wrestling over some of that stuff. It also means like failing. Like, you're gonna have some stuff that just falls flat, because we're like middle-aged guys, and sometimes we're dads, and it's like we come up with stuff that's just lame, but that's okay. You gotta try to risk it a little bit sometimes. The other thing I was gonna mention that I thought of is with the PowerPoints that I showed the players at the beginning of the year. This year, they'll probably all come from me and the coaching staff, who will create those. But then in the future, once players kind of know the program and things, then I have the players start to create those. So like at Kent Lake, we had awesome leaders last couple of years. I mean, every year, but the last couple of years, we entrusted them to make those PowerPoints. So, like one of our guys was a stud, set our RBI record and stuff. So he talked about like I call it R3I approach, which is like basically hitting with runners on third, less than 2 outs. So he talked to the team about like, what's our approach in those situations? What's the mindset in those situations? And I think it means a little bit more coming from the player instead of me, especially when you've got like a stud like that, like a senior who's going places and things. And then it gives him the opportunity to practice his leadership as well. Or another kid made like a phenomenal presentation on our practice philosophy, how we go about our work at practices. So again, when he creates that and it's coming from him, I think it holds a lot more weight, and it holds him accountable too. Like now, you go on the practice field and it's like, you just gave this 25-minute presentation on how we practice. Well, now you better like bring it too. And those guys always did, but I think it's great if the kids can take over some of that stuff. So I love the whole like culture building thing. Excited to be able to to install some of that at a new program. Again, it's like, I'm fortunate because this program it's been in great hands, but again, you got to make it your own and just trying to put your own fingerprint, because you can only do what you can do. So
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. The idea, I love how you have a kind of metaphor for each of your pieces that you're trying to build. I think that's such a cool fit, and that's something that's going to stick with your kids too. They're going to be able to relate to that. And I go back to Bruce Brown. I don't know if you've done much with Bruce Brown's proactive stuff, but one of the things he always says is, if you're going to have standards, expectations, every kid in your program needs to be able to communicate what those are, right? It's not okay for them to just say, oh, I don't know what those are, and I think I could just hear and feel the way that you're going to build this thing. All of your kids are going to be able to say these things. They're going to take pride in these things. They're going to understand why they're doing it. Like you said, I think that's just awesome. So really good. I'm just scrambling, taking notes here because you're bringing so much good stuff.
yeah, and actually, I'll give you a split second, but to kind of build on that, what you said about like the kids repeating it, I think that's really important. That's kind of how you can monitor if things are going in the right direction. For instance, like if we had a bad inning, you would usually hear kids like come off the field and they run into like their huddle and stuff, because we always meet in between innings out front of the dugout, and you would hear them say like good, like it would just be sprinkled throughout the dudes coming in, because they knew like that's how we respond when we have a bad inning. Like it's good, like it gives us a chance to respond now and show people that that we can counter punch and things like that. Or we might be down by 3 or 4 runs late in the game, and you'd hear some guys saying like, hey, never out of the fight. And that's one of our themes or mottos there. So it's good, like when you hear the players start to be able to repeat those things, and then you can tell like, okay, we're at least doing a decent job of getting that information and getting it to the players and repeating it and staying consistent, because you can't do everything. And if you try and do everything, then you're going to do nothing. So you got to try and streamline your messaging and pick out, what are the things that like we really want the players to be repeating and taking away, and then just say those things, hundreds of times, thousands of times throughout the year.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And you've said, buzzword a couple of times, on some of these buzzword things. And I think player-driven culture is another one of those buzzwords of today. And, guys will drop things like, player-driven culture or catch play or whatever that might be, and then have no idea, what that means, or they'll say what it means, but not break it down to that, simplicity piece to be able to teach. And I think, that's awesome that your culture that you're developing is a player-driven culture, but you're the one steering the direction you want it to go right now, and then you're going to break it into having your kids take ownership of as that goes. I think that's just awesome. So really good stuff. Let's roll into number 3 here, because I think, like we talked about, there's going to be some overlap and stuff. But number 3 was just, what are 3 things you plan to do between February 29th, when there'll probably be some snow on the ground or whatever it looks like out there, and then March 10th. I put March 10th, but all of us are probably playing a jamboree somewhere between practice 9 or whatever that number we need to get in now, in March 12th, which is typically that first Saturday guys are jamboreeing. But kind of, what are 3 things you want to build in terms of expectation or skill? And I know you hit a little bit on skill, you hit a lot on your cultural stuff. So just kind of 3 things you're pinpointing here to get started, or where you plan to start, and what direction you go when you hit the field.
Yeah. So the kind of the 3, just to give a quick overview. I think have a checklist of things is number 1. Number 2 will be our classroom meetings. And then number 3 is installing leadership systems. So the first thing is we start with the checklist of everything that we need to accomplish by the first week, by the first game. And some of those things you realize, like, okay, we don't need to have 3 or 4 bunt defenses. We can probably, can we get away with 1 at first? Can we get away with 2? Same thing with like our first and third offense. Can we get away with like 1 or 2 things? So anyways, you start to streamline it and work through that checklist. What are the things that we can afford to install as we go? And then what things do we need to have immediately? So I keep the same checklist every year, and I'll tweak it a little bit, but I start filling in the boxes. Okay, this is when we're going to be covering these things. And then I start building practice plans around that. So that's the first thing that we'll do, the first 10 days or so, 11 days, is work with that checklist to make sure that we're hitting everything. And some of those things are basics like, what's our ground ball fielding philosophy? And then second, could be how do we line up post game after wins? So we want to look like clean with those things. Again, like every move matters. It's all part of building the image of the program and how we do things. So you want to be organized, never chaotic or disorganized. So yeah, some of them are little things, and then some are bigger things. Pop-up communication is like a big thing. That's a big deal. Whereas lining up for the national anthem, not as big of a deal, but we still want to do it the right way. So we start with that checklist. The second thing is those classroom meetings. I'm big into that because you can speak to the whole program. So here at Tahoma, we'll have 3 teams. We'll have between 45 to probably 50 players in the program. So if there's a PowerPoint that talks about our approach to hitting, well, now we can speak to all 50 people, and we have a better chance of success of capturing their attention, especially like with those PowerPoints. They need to be dynamic. They need to be good. We're dealing with high school kids that have phones that are more interesting than any of us. And that means that we gotta like capture their attention with cool Juan Soto bombs. And if it's, if we're talking about ground ball fielding, we've got to have like Javi Baez in there looking good. And, there's got to be like cool clips. And I use GIFs a lot for that stuff. Be able to like record videos off of phones now is awesome. I remember 10 years ago, I bought like this super expensive recording device to like pull video off of my TV, and it was a huge hassle. Now you can screen grab anything. So
Yeah.
but yeah, have that kind of stuff in there. Good visuals for the kids, but hold their attention during those PowerPoints. Try and make it really clear. You take something like relays, it could be super complicated. So we just try and give them like a couple rules of thumb. Let's get back to those rules of thumb. So anyways, yeah, those PowerPoints are big for us. And like I said, that's also where we get to install the culture as well. And you've got I make 2 types of PowerPoints. One, it's going to be like the Bear Nation PowerPoint, where we're talking more about culture. Second group of PowerPoints is more like skills and gameplay, and making sure that we're on the same page with that. And then you got to keep in mind that and convey to the athletes that, we get to see you for a couple weeks, then we start playing games. I only get to work with you for, maybe 8 to 10 weeks of the season or of the year. And we're not going to try. There's a lot of things that are non-negotiables. This is how we're going to do it. But then there's a lot of things like with the swing, like it's hard to rebuild a swing in a couple weeks. And you've seen it with like tons of guys. You look at them and they're like, I don't really love your swing, but you've hit 400 like 3 years in a row. I'm probably gonna leave you alone, or at least have conversations with the athletes. I think that there's some kids that, you might have a dude that's 6'4", built like a Greek god, and he can't hit the ball in the infield, but he gets tons of singles still. And you have a conversation with that player like, hey, you're doing great, and you're going to be a really productive high school player. If you want to go on and do something else in the game, then, I think there's some adjustments that you can make, but that's your call. And then work with players on those types of things as to, what do they want to become, and let them take ownership of that. If they're happy, being the all league high schooler with the swing that they have, but maybe not having any pop, then that's fine. Like I'm okay with them. We can find ways for that athlete to help out the team. If they want to play Major League Baseball or something, and you're talking to them, it's like, well, major leaguers, they hit rockets, and these guys have big time pop, and you're gonna need to get more out of your swing. Like the the Dallas Baptist coach always says, like, you're gonna have to build a bigger engine if that's what your goals are. So working with the athletes, making sure that it's conveyed to them that there's some things that are non-negotiables as we're going through these lessons and PowerPoints, but there's some things that you can certainly have more of a say on and take ownership of. So, and then the third thing is installing a leadership system. So Urban Meyer, I read his book a couple years ago. I don't know if Urban Meyer is still like okay to talk about.
I know. I did the same thing with the 3 C's, and I love his 3 C's, but now I'm like, gosh, could I even discuss that anymore?
Yeah. So yeah, his thing was like, basically if you want to have like great leadership, you gotta have a system. Everybody talks about leadership, but some programs have a system. So I took that as like a challenge, like, oh shoot, I don't have a leadership system. So that's something that I spent a couple years kind of refining over the the last couple off seasons and stuff. But for instance, trying to install our leadership system, it comes down to, I used to have like captains, team captains and things like that. And I've gone away from that more towards, and this is something Brian Green over in your neck of the woods has talked about too, but having like different leaders for different games, different activities. Like he has dugout leaders, but for like a practice, hey, you two guys are going to be the leaders for this practice, and then rotate those guys so that they're, especially in high school, like, yeah, we're trying to win games, but we're also trying to develop these kids for things beyond high school. So that means that we can't just invest all of our leadership equity into, the same two guys all the time. It's gotta be everybody.
Yeah.
So rotating some of those tasks, and then also debriefing with them afterwards with the coach for 5 minutes. And I created like a rubric because, we're teachers, especially as a middle school teacher. I'm sure you've got a stack of rubrics behind you, but developing a rubric that we can go through quickly. How did you do with your leadership on these different points? Where are some areas that we can improve on? And just have a quick conversation with them so that the leadership opportunity is something that they're getting feedback on. One of my buddies who I asked him to meet up with me and talk to me about like the system. He's a former Navy SEAL, and he talked about how, like, if you're gonna do, and this was a big deal for me, if you're gonna do some type of leadership opportunity for your players, it's only really beneficial if you're gonna debrief with them. So we created just a real simple after action report that we can go through with that rubric and hit on those points, and then they'll have another opportunity in a few weeks and see if we can get better. So those are the three things that we're gonna try to really be diligent about installing. The checklist, hit all the ins and outs. That's pretty basic. Second thing would be those PowerPoints, making sure that we're intentional about teaching and building our philosophy and culture and hitting that skill stuff. And then 3, installing that leadership system.
That's awesome, man. I'm a checklist guy myself. I still have a checklist my dad gave me when I got into JV baseball at Moscow High School. When I was like 20 years old, and I've got that one, and then I've got this one that just keeps growing every year, and I put national anthem. I've got that on there.
Yeah.
So,
You got to. Yeah, you don't want to look like a clown on the first game.
I know. No, it's huge, and I think your thought process about your leadership stuff is fantastic. I'm in the same boat. I always, when I first started coaching, like around the 2010, 12, 13 season, everybody wanted their kids to be a captain. And there was like this push for us to name captains. And I always looked at it from baseball and I was like, why do we need to name captains? Like for football, I get it. You go out and you do your coin flip and everything. But for baseball, I want all my guys to be captains. We want all of them to do that. And that was something that my dad always taught at Woodinville, was everybody's going to be a captain. We want you all to lead by example here. And Bruce Brown, same thing. He said, teach everybody leadership and see what filters out, and go from there. So I think that's awesome. Really appreciate you coming on, answering these questions today, Coach. This was just outstanding. I know a lot of coaches are going to benefit from the stuff you had to say today. So I appreciate that. And we'll definitely look to bring you back on. Good luck this spring. Good luck taking over. Say hi to Coach Russ for me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And good luck over there in that SPSL league, man. NPSL league.
NPSL now, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, time for change.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, though. I appreciate it. And good luck to you over there as well, and in Pullman. And I appreciate you letting me come on.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it very much.